Coming up on the Booth Review, myself, Big Fletch, we're going to go through week by week how the Commanders got to 8-5.
And we're going to let you know which Commanders players should make the Pro Bowl.
That's coming up on the Booth Review next. Welcome into the Booth Review. I'm Bram Weinstein with Big Fletch, London Fletcher, the bye-week edition of the Booth Review. So, hope you had a nice, relaxing week, London.
I did. Got a chance to kind of kick back, watch my daughter play a little basketball yesterday, kind of try to get my life back in order for a few days. So it's been relaxing. Spending time with my dogs as well.
So you said what in the past when we had the mini bye, you start watching football, but then the TV watches you. Did you get that again this weekend? Yeah.
You know, no, not this. So let's see. Monday night I watched the Broncos Monday night game was outstanding, man. That was good football game, and I love watching football. So I doze off here and there as you watch a little football. That happens.
I think Jameis Winston, it might be the most beloved quarterback ever who throws a lot of pick sixes.
Yeah, he's asking for deliverance. Hey, man, God said ask him for anything. So let's see if he gets delivered from throwing pick sixes.
All right, let's get into the Commanders a little bit here, and because it's the bye week. Unfortunately, we're off the win, so it's 8-5. There still would be qualifying for the playoffs if the season ended today. They got 4 games left, 2 at home, 2 on the road. A couple of them are under 500 teams. They'll get a rematch of Philadelphia. The Atlanta game is setting up to be a really big game late week 17. Let's kind of set the table here for what some expectations are for the rest of the season. And then I kind of want to just kind of reminisce a little bit here. 8-5. I don't know what your expectations were coming into the season. Mine were about a 500 team. I was hoping Jaden would look the part. They've exceeded my expectations. So I don't know if they're kind of tracking where you thought they would be at this point or what.
Well, during our preseason show, we on the Command Center, we had kind of predictions of wins, and I felt like I believe I predicted them to win. I think it was 11 games, maybe even 12. So they're close to being on schedule with my prediction. And a lot of people may thought I was kind of crazy when I said that, but just looking at their schedule at the point in time when we were doing that, I predicted them to win. I think it was about 11 or 12 games.
Why? What stood out to you that made you think they would be that good?
Well, I just like the obviously the addition of Jaden at the quarterback position. Like the healthy B-Rob, was really bought in on the defensive additions, bringing in Dan Quinn as the head coach, getting Joe Witt Jr. as the defensive coordinator. The way they were going to play football, looking at the track record of Witt and Dan Quinn, knowing that the defense would be a lot better than what they were. So that was a lot of it was based off of that, my belief in them and their ability to get the defense to play a lot better. And I thought also I had Cliff Kingsbury to the offense. The offense would be more productive than it was a year ago as well.
Yeah, I liked the setup. I thought the staff was robust and deep, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Kingsbury, an ex-head coach in Anthony Lynn behind him, coaching the running game. Brian Johnson, who had coached at a high level with Philadelphia here as well. And then defensively, we know the reputation of Quinn and Joe Witt for years of getting turnover machines, being able to get pressure, having top-ranked defenses. But you looked like across the board and you went 30 to 35 new players. Some of them are veterans. We talked a lot about Bobby Wagner last week. Bobby Wagner shows up, Zach Ertz shows up, Austin Eckler shows up, but you wonder, is this going to come together? And in the spring and the summer, they were preaching that it had. And in hindsight now, clearly that was true, but I'm not sure I knew it when we entered training camp.
Yeah, Bram, that's why, I did and you did. So I guess. No, but I just, it's about a lot of the guys they brought in. First and foremost, they had prior relationships with. So, they knew what to expect from these guys from a player standpoint, from a person standpoint, locker room standpoint. You mentioned the Bobby Wagner sign up. I knew he was going to play huge dividends just not only as a leader, but also from a productivity standpoint. Frankie Louvu, I think he was the top rated linebacker in free agency, playing down in Carolina. They weren't winning a lot of games, so you don't get a lot of national exposure. Not a lot of people outside of Carolina really knew what he was capable of doing. I thought adding those two pieces, getting Austin Eckler, who he dealt with some injuries with the Chargers last year, but if he was healthy, that run game and what he brought to the table was going to be improved. Making some investments in the offensive line was key as well. So it was a lot of different things that had me feeling optimistic about the roster and what they would be able to do this season.
All right, so let's reminisce a little bit. Let's go through the season a little bit. And I want to start really at the week of the Jets game, which was the first preseason game. And they spent the week, remember, in New York, and they were going to have the joint practice with the Jets. And I kind of thought like, okay, this is going to be the first real sign. We'll get a chance to kind of see what it looks like. And I think you and I were both like, that practice is going to mean everything because we don't know how much of the starters are going to play in the preseason game and all that stuff. And the practice was a total bust because it poured. And
right.
Aaron Rodgers didn't practice, and we were missing a couple people, and it was so rainy and cold that the whole thing was like a bust. So we get to the preseason game. Jaden's making his debut, and I'll never forget this because in hindsight now, it should have told us everything we needed to know about the guy. He only was allowed to run 3 plays, and on the third one, he changed the play, and he wasn't even supposed to do that, but he changed into the right play and threw a bomb to De'Ami Brown, and that started the whole week of Top Gun in that whole thing. And that was my first real sign of, okay, this guy hasn't looked like a rookie through camp, and here he is in like moment one showing off he's not a rookie.
Man, that seems so long ago. You take us all the way back to that Jets practice and also that Jets preseason game. I think it says a lot about just his mental capacity, his intelligent football IQ, making that audible at the line of scrimmage based on the look that the Jets were giving him and making that play a perfectly thrown football to De'Ami Brown. And he actually had a play similar to that in the practice before the rain started just really pouring down. That was early in the scrimmage or 7-on-7 part of the practice against the Jets, where he hits De'Ami on a similar type of play. And I believe De'Ami made a one-handed catch in that practice. But, just that kind of set the stage. We knew about his arm talent, his ability to throw the deep ball, especially against, man-to-man coverage. But what we didn't know is just the type of work ethic he had and, the amount of work he was going to be able to put in and that he has put in to put him in the position that he's in right now.
So then week 2, they did the same thing. They spent the whole week in Florida, which no complaints. Happy to go to Florida for a week. And we had the practice with the Dolphins. And this one, it was boiling outside, but at least the weather was practicable. It wasn't like pouring like it was in New York. And this was a really strong showing specifically on defense. And I remember standing there watching this, and you never know what you're going to get in the preseason because everyone says, oh, they're going to be vanilla. They're not going to show you anything. That's not what the Dolphins did at all. Like, they ran their offense. They were running all of this motion and all these different things they do with all these different players. They have a very unique offense. They put it full on display. And it was my first sign that, because we had a lot of questions about the defense, a lot of new people out there, and who are the corners going to be? Where's the pass rush going to come from? Are they going to have a good solid run defense? And that first practice was the first time that I went, if you could go toe to toe with them at this stage, we're in good shape here.
Yeah, no, with the Dolphins, you talk about teams being kind of vanilla during the preseason. Well, the Dolphins, under Mike McDaniels, he's been the head coach, I think, now 3 seasons. And people know what their offense is. They know kind of what you're going to get week in and week out for them. So it wasn't a situation where they're going to have to hold anything close to the vest. They're going to have to all of a sudden run out of the I formation when that's totally not how they operate and have 2 under center the whole time. This, a lot of misdirections, shotgun, take shots, all kind of, RPOs and zone reads and things like that to mess with you. That really showed you going against the Dolphins really tests the discipline of the defense because of all the misdirection and the pullers and where's the football going to be. Is the defense going to be disciplined enough to be exactly where they're supposed to be, not get caught up in all the eye candy, making sure you're focused on your job at hand. So with that practice, and also it carried over into the preseason games where the guys really had a nice showing, as you mentioned. And also it was a great work for Jayden in the offense because of the Dolphins defense. They blitzed the heck out of Jayden in that ball game. They were not holding anything close to the best either. They were bringing a lot of 5-6 man pressures, and Jayden, he handled that and he really acclimated himself at an extremely high manner in that ball game against the Dolphins.
The other thing that really stood out about the Dolphins preseason game and the Patriots preseason game the following week, the final preseason game, what really stood out was we were talking about this earlier, how they had kind of preached that this brotherhood was here, that they'd really come together early, that they were all all in on this whole thing very quickly. Yeah. And that really showed on the sideline in the third and fourth quarter, specifically late. Both of those games were really close. And remember, Jeff Driscoll had made a bunch of crazy plays in the Miami game, and they had a chance to win at the end. And the sideline, you could just see them, was so engaged watching it, like wasn't meaningless to them. Same thing happened against New England like a week later. Remember, Trace McSorley had been here like a week because there were a bunch of injuries at the quarterback position. They had to bring somebody in. He trucked some guy from New England. Yes. The sideline's going crazy for him. So like all these like what we deem like meaningless games that don't have, the score doesn't really matter. The sideline was so into it that it was kind of a glimpse. I think it was like a good little peek into the locker room of just how serious they were and kind of in it for one another at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And still, we didn't know how strong the bond was and how it was building because of, and that's a credit to Dan Quinn and the culture that he set and getting everybody to buy in, especially when you mentioned how many new guys was on the team at that point in time. Over half I know this was during preseason, so you still were at a 90-man roster. Out of that 90, maybe 50 or no, probably 60 were new guys and first-year guys on the football team. So that says a lot. Credit to him, his coaching staff, to be able to get everybody to buy in. And also a credit to the leaders and the players on the football team too. Like you mentioned, a guy like Trace McSorley, who had only been there for a few days, actually before when he played against the Dolphins, he had only been there with maybe a day and a half before he played against the Dolphins. And then, the game against the Patriots, being there about a week. But for them to embrace him and him to resonate with those guys in that manner, that said a lot and says a lot about their team.
The other thing that really stood out about the preseason to me that did carry over, and oftentimes like you can't take much out of these games, but in this case, I thought it was different for these reasons. Like Jayden kind of showed he's ready to do it, like right off the jump. Like it became obvious that he's ahead of the curve as a rookie. The camaraderie of the team was completely on display. And the other thing that really carried over, I remember, was it wasn't just that Jayden looked the part. Driscoll had these great moments. Mariota looked good in the times that he played. McSorley walks in, and yes, he had a previous relationship with Cliff Kingsbury, but this is all new, and he was playing well. And what I noticed early was the play calling was getting them into the drives in these second and manageables, third and shorts early in these preseason games. And it totally carried over into the regular season where they were effectively the best offense in the NFL, like the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, that says a lot. It's smart football. You talk about staying ahead of the change, not having to play on third and long situation, not being in second and long situations, especially with a young young quarterback. You don't want to have him in a ton of third and longs, obvious pass situation. You want to have him in some third and, let's call it 3, 4 or less. Ideally, third and 2 is even better. But the quick game, the no huddle stuff, all those types of things, running a lot. They ran tempo in the preseason, and that's again, that wasn't going to be a shock to anybody who had gone against Cliff Kingsbury's offense. They knew the no huddle was a big part of his offense, and in order to get Jaden ready for the regular season, they had to run it during the preseason. They ran it to perfection, and the quick passing game it served them and served them well. Especially you think about the game against the Tennessee Titans, when the offense had a couple games where it wasn't playing the way it needed to play, kind of playing behind the sticks a lot, being in a lot of third and long situations. What did they do? They got back to the quick passing game. They ran the ball effectively. B. Rob's first carry goes for 40 yards. So that's what the offense it looks like when it's clicking on all cylinders.
So the schedule read go play a playoff team on the road to open. And so that was a big ask, right? To turn around that. This team was brand new with probably the most overturned roster in the NFL. Rookie quarterback's going to make his debut against a blitz-happy defense that happens to be probably one of the teams that had the fewest amount of turnover. Like they had basically the majority of their team back. It was a tough ask to go down there for their opener. And the two things that really stood out to me was we learned early, like when they came after Jaden, he was going to vacate the pocket. Remember the big story was he ran too much is what everyone was trying to say on the outside. I actually looked at it as maybe, but he already showcased that even under massive duress being blitzed, high percentage of times, he's making the right decision with the ball. Like he's never putting the ball in harm's way. And then defensively, what stood out to me was they needed to just finish at the quarterback, because if they had finished on Baker a couple of times, I'm not sure that the score would have gotten the way that it did. But this was a classic. This team's new and that team's been there, done that, and was in the playoffs. And that's what you get sometimes.
We had I think about 6 opportunities to sack Baker, and he was, I think maybe only got him down once, and he was able to escape. He was more elusive than I thought he would be. The secondary had some communication issues, and that was something that you left that ball game saying, hey, that needs to be cleaned up as well. In terms of Jaden in that ball game against the Buccaneers, he grew a lot from week 1 to week 2, because in that game against the Buccaneers, there were opportunities for him to throw the football into, take a little bit more risk, so to speak. It was also him getting used to what's considered NFL open and what's considered open in the college ranks, where there were times where he had opportunities to rip it and he didn't do it. He didn't necessarily trust it. And between week 1 and week 2, you saw a big difference. He was ripping those quick outs that he didn't do in the game against the Buccaneers. He was hitting some of those deep digs and things like that he didn't do in the first game against the Buccaneers. There was times where when he left the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, because there were some opportunities in the game against the Buccaneers. If he kept his eyes down the field, or, he could hold the defense up just half a second longer or a second longer and allow him to even create more of a problem running, using his legs. And that was a big ask, like you mentioned, going against Tampa Bay, Todd Bowles and that defense. But it was a lot of growth that he learned from that game, and he carried it over into week 2 against the Giants.
The week 2 game was one of the weirdest games I've ever been around. Like they kicked 7 field goals, franchise record. They didn't score a touchdown. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns. It was the first of the many weird historic stats that we started getting in the first 6 weeks, where every week we're like, not since World War II, not since 1976, not since this, not since that. This was one of the first ones. Their kicker got hurt on the opening kickoff. So they found out quickly that they couldn't kick extra points or field goals, which mattered late when they went for a 4th down and didn't kick a field goal. Washington walks up and down the field, kicks 7 field goals because they can't score in the red zone against them, win a bizarre game, 21-18. Tressway didn't punt. They didn't score a touchdown. It was one of the strangest. I don't even know how to really think about it now when I think back to it.
Now I was watching that game from home, and the field goals, the offense stalling out in the red zone, and their defensive coordinator, I think is for the Giants, Shane Bowen, if memory serves me correctly. He was outstanding as a defensive coordinator a year ago with the Tennessee Titans and the red zone defense. I think they may have been number 1, number 2 in the red zone, and he made it tight for us. And then we had some problems, scoring in the red zone, punching it in, and really a couple teams. Penalties were also a major factor in that game. But that just think about that. Austin Seibert kicking all those field goals in that game. It was something I guess we didn't anticipate happening, but we were thankful to have him.
Well, I mean, remember we were sitting there in the locker room talking to Austin Seibert. He'd been there a week, right? Because they had the summer of can't figure out who the kicker's going to be every single week.
Yes.
Traded for Cade York. Cade York had a bad week 1, so they moved on, brought in Seibert, who they had practiced against with the Jets, and 90-plus-year-old franchise breaks a field goal record after being there for 5 days. It was the first sign of also, because we've had a lot of these and we'll get to the big ones. We're kind of down for anything this year.
No, you're right. And again, I'm just happy he was making those field goals because the preseason games and Cade York in that first game, field goals were not a sure thing.
No.
I mean, extra points, field goals, they were not necessarily a sure thing that you could say, all right, and I don't care what distance it was from. It could have been a 30-yarder. You just holding your breath like, is the kicker going to make this?
So then we get to Cincinnati, and it's Monday night there. They're an annual playoff team. They're getting T. Higgins back. He hadn't played the whole year.
Yeah.
The Vegas didn't like us. The national media is paying no attention yet because there weren't many expectations, and they're 1-1 coming off a game where they didn't score a touchdown. So nobody's buying them, right? So nobody's paying attention to them. And they go there, and this was singularly one of maybe the greatest performances I've ever seen out of a rookie quarterback ever, which included the late pass to McLaurin that was the first of 3 I cannot believe what I just saw moments out of Jaden, late clutch play. And that was, I think, the first sign of this is going to be different.
No, he was outstanding in that ball game against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think he completed over 90% of his passes or close to it.
I think it was another one of those. It was second week in a row that we got the no rookie quarterbacks ever done that before.
Yeah, no, he was outstanding, and the growth between week 1 and week 3, all of a sudden, you go from, as you mentioned, not scoring a touchdown against the Giants to lighting up the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football on the road, hostile environment, and he did not flinch at all. He was absolutely electric. I mean, the passes that he was completing, the poise, and it wasn't a whole lot of defense being played in that game, but we got just enough from our defense in that game to come out of there with a victory. But just that was when we finally saw the true potential of this offense. That's when you're like, oh, hold on, because we ran the ball effectively, and as I mentioned several times, Jaden was outstanding.
There was a 4th and 3, I think, if I remember right, where he just found McCaffrey early in the game. That was one of those moments where you're like, oh man. And you start to see that he's unflappable. He's ahead of his curve. And I'm like, listen, the craziest pass they hit was the Hail Mary, and we'll get to it. But that one to Terry McLaurin, where it's a full-on free rush, he's going to get hit, threw the ball when Terry was at the 20-yard line, hits him perfectly in the end zone. McLaurin makes an unbelievable contested catch to stay in bounds. Remember, he's right on the sideline. Yeah. That was singularly one of the greatest plays I've seen this team complete to this point in years. It was wild.
It was, and a lot of quarterbacks can complete that pass versus a clean pocket, not under duress or anything like that. But when you have somebody barreling down on you unblocked, and you have to stand and deliver and not flinch, and he did that knowing, hey, I'm about to take a shot, but I have to stand in here and deliver an accurate throw to Terry. And mind you, Terry went to the sideline and asked Cliff, to call that play, moved him to the right side. And, when Terry was normally lining up on the left side, moved it to the right side, and they ran that go ball. And it was also a great job by Terry because he had to give a little stutter to the defensive back to create the type of separation or give himself a chance because the DB was playing so far off. So great opportunity, great play call, by Terry going to ask for it. Great job by Cliff trusting Terry, and a great throw by Jaden in that situation.
So then I remember, all right, this happens on Monday Night Football. Jaden lights it up. Now, you know how this goes. The news cycles are going to fall in love with you. And the only game in town, they won a game no one thought they were going to win. They did it in style. And now everybody loves you, and everyone's going to hot take how great the team is. And they had to turn around on a short week and go to the West Coast. And actually, that Arizona game is the one that will stick out to me as the most impressive of the year to this point. And hopefully we got more to come, because that is set up for a loss. You're coming off of this humongous emotional win. Everybody's telling you how great you are. You go out to Arizona on a short week, and they blew them out. Like, that was where I went, this, I think, when we started going, is this real? Because when they did that, to bounce back emotionally, physically, and to beat a team, and I know people at the time were like, well, that's not that big a deal. Go look at their record now and how that one stands up now. That was the moment where I went, oh, this is really actually going to be different.
Well, I thought it was brilliant, though, also by Dan Quinn to fly directly from Cincinnati to Arizona, not go from Cincinnati back to Virginia, then fly out to Arizona later on in the week. For them to, fly from Cincinnati directly to Arizona, spend the entire week out in Arizona, that goes a long way in terms of recovery, getting acclimated to your surroundings, also building more chemistry, bonding. That was brilliant move by Dan Quinn and the staff for doing that. And it's just again, you mentioned the performance. I think collectively that was the best game, like you said. Offense was rolling, defense played outstanding in that ball game, holding Arizona to, I think, 14 points.
14 points, had that 4th and 1 sack. Remember that?
Yeah. So just at that point in time, I think that's probably where the team started to believe, like, man, we really have something special. Because to that point, the defense had its moments, offense had, more moments, but in that ball game, both of them were hitting on all cylinders.
And I mean, listen, 3 of the first 4 were on the road. Think whatever you want about Arizona. I think everybody thinks about them differently now, but think what you want about them at the time. At Cincinnati's an annual playoff team, so no one knew that their season was going to go sideways like this. Tampa Bay was off of a playoff. The fact that they were 3-1 at that point, I think, told you a lot about where this thing was going. They come back and they get Cleveland, who had really been struggling. And you know what? The mark of a good team is you take advantage of it. And they blew them out. And Jaden was sitting the whole 4th quarter.
And Cleveland was a good defense going into that ball game. Cleveland was a team that won 11 games a year before, and they had some issues at the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson wasn't playing good football at all. But that defense was going to be a challenge. And early in that ball game, that defense of the Browns showed up and was doing some good things. But our defense was they were all over Deshaun Watson. Was that the game? Did we have like 7 sacks or something?
Yeah.
It was just a crazy game. I think Frankie Louva was all over the football field in that ball game, doing an outstanding job. And you mentioned Jaden and sitting in the 4th quarter. You don't sit in the 4th quarter like that unless you have both offense, defense, special teams playing extremely good football. And it could have been a situation where, hey, you've had these great back-to-back road victories. You go into Cincinnati on a Monday night, win a big game. Go out to Arizona, win a nice convincingly win against the Cardinals. Now, potential letdown game at home against a Browns team that wasn't very good. But no, what do? They took it to them.
The other thing about that one that got me too, because it's one of 5 times this has happened this year that they have collectively as a team rushed for over 200 yards. Happened this weekend past weekend against Tennessee. They had 215. But what really stood out to me about that was B-Rob had 18 yards rushing and the team had 215. Like,
right.
If you told me at the end of the summer, this is going to be a top 5 rush offense, I'm not sure. I would have believed that they'll be good. I like B-Rob. I want to see it with this new O-line. I know that their quarterback can run, so they'll be better than people think. But I never would have envisioned this. And that was one of the ones that stood out to me too. I'm like, 215 and their best running back had 18 yards of it. Like, what are we looking at here?
No, we didn't know what the offensive line was going to be like. You mentioned, hey, let me see it first. They went out and invested in the offensive line, bringing in Tyler Biadasz, bringing in Nick Allegretti, drafting Brandon Coleman. And I'm not even sure at that point in time, him and Lucas they were still splitting and sharing times at the left tackle position. So for the offensive line to run the way they ran and the physicality which the offensive line in the running game, the tight ends, you have to include them as well when you're and the receivers from a blocking standpoint. You would definitely like, okay, let me. It was unexpected. It was definitely unexpected. I'd say if you told me top 10, okay, I could believe that. You know, you bring in Anthony Lynn, came from the San Francisco 49ers. They were always one of the best rushing teams in the National Football League. He's the run game coordinator. So I could see them, being a top 10 rushing offense, but at that point to be top 5, and they may have even been top 3 at that point in time.
They were, and I think they still are now after 267 against Tennessee. I got to look at the stats. All right, so then we went to Baltimore, and it was like it felt like the first big game, that this team had because they're on a winning streak. All of a sudden, there's a measuring stick. Jaden had talked about how he, grew up. He loved watching Lamar play. Regional rivals, if you will, close game.
Yes.
Like, let's find out. Like everyone buys that Baltimore's a contender. Let's find out where we are and how real this start is. And you know what I loved? I know they lost and they hung in there and they fought and they kept the score close. But I loved how honest Quinn was after the game where he said it was lopsided because it was. The score might not have been, but it was. Mm-hmm. And I loved how the locker room was pissed. Like you could just feel it when we were there that they felt like they could have played better. They weren't going, oh, we lost on the road to a really good team, or messaged it like, well, we only lost by a touchdown and pretended like it was a really, really close game. Not at all. Like I loved the honesty and intensity in that locker room that day.
Now that was a game where you would have loved to have B-Rob in that ball game. He missed that game. Dealing with I believe it was a hamstring injury at that time, or was it a knee? I can't. It's been so long. Yeah, it's so missing that ball game against the Baltimore Ravens. There wasn't balance like they had in the prior games. We were too reliant on the pass, and I know Baltimore, they were the number one ranked rush defense at that point in time, but it just wasn't the right type of balance. They end up throwing the football, I think, like 50 times, if definitely over 40 times, and maybe just rushing like 18 times. It wasn't the same type of run pass ratio that you wanted, and they had been success. It was too reliant on that. Defensively, we had opportunities, didn't get consistent pressure on Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers. He had a day, receiving the football, catching the football, but again, the fact that how they felt about that game, because they're like, hey, we're a much better football team than we just showed on that field today. We're going to learn from this. We're going to take this, and we will be a better team because of it.
And their passing defense significantly improved from that point forward. I think they've been working on the rotation of the corners. We'll see with Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah. Hopefully he's playing against the Saints. We'll see. But he's going to be back sooner rather than later. But they were working on the rotation. They were still trying to find, I think, the consistent pass rush, where it was going to come from. That's really come around here more in recent weeks. But it was still a work in progress then. But then they come back home. They get Carolina. So they're off their first, what I think is big loss, of the year. I don't really count the Tampa Bay loss as a big loss, but this was the one. There was a lot of buildup and they lost. How are they going to respond? And this is the third time in 4 games that they just blew somebody out. And Jaden got hurt. Remember? Like Jaden got hurt. It didn't slow down the offense for a second.
Yeah, he got hurt early in that game. And it was going back to that Baltimore Ravens game. Jaden threw it 35 times in that game, and we rushed 18 times for 52 yards. I knew there was a 52 in there somewhere, but I had to check my stats. But, yeah, in that game against Carolina, got hurt early in that ball game, and Mariota came into that game. It took him a series or two to kind of get his footing, get his rhythm going. He hadn't played a whole lot, and Dan shared with us. It wasn't like he was getting any reps with the starters during the practice week. It was him a lot of times after practice going over the script with the practice squad guys and some of the other receivers to get himself ready, and just a tremendous performance by him, because once he really got his feet going and got settled in, he showed what he was able to do, and it was just another excellent victory, not a convincing win again, and left no doubt that we're not going to play around with a bad football team.
And then I don't know. I had this premonition on the day of the Chicago game. Like they'd moved it, they flexed it into the national window. It's Jaden versus Caleb. I know, Chicago's gone through a lot since this happened, but they were 4-2 when Washington played them at the time. Like they were actually going up. They were streaking up. Their offense was playing better. I don't think actually Caleb's played better since, but like altogether, they were playing a lot better. And that was a big buildup for that game. It felt like a really big game. And for so many reasons. So I think we just kind of knew that it was going to be a really good one. I never would have anticipated what happened at the end. And I got to tell you, like, every time
something exciting happened at the end of that game?
It's just every time I think about it, I just feel like privileged that we were there, because it had never happened before. And it was amazing, honestly amazing.
Now, it's one of those moments where 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now, people will ask the question, where were you when the Hail Noah play happened? And we'll get to say, you know what? We were in a radio booth calling that game, and we were there, and we witnessed it. I'll say this. It took a Hail Mary to win that game, but we kicked Chicago's butt in that game. Like, they didn't deserve to win that football game.
I agree.
We would have been so disappointed if we lost that game, because Chicago had hadn't done a whole lot, especially offensively in that ball game.
They shut them out the first half.
Yeah.
I know, but just every time I think about it, I'm like, man, like we may never see that again. It had never happened before. We may never see it again. It was just unbelievable. So then, not like we were talking about earlier with like Cincinnati, they had this emotional win. They turned around. They played well. Now you got to get over a Hail Mary. Team admitted that they were kind of smelling themselves for a few days because, how do you get away from it? Everyone's phone's blowing up. Everybody wants to do interviews with you. It's hard to refocus again. They had to turn around and play the Giants again. Team that they don't win up there very much. I know what the Giants record is, but they don't win very much up there. And I thought it was just a very professional effort. They gave up a couple of late scores that made it close, but relatively I thought they should have won going away. And had they not given up a late touchdown to the tight end on a busted coverage, I think they would have.
I understand them being it taking them a while to get over that game against the Chicago Bears. Heck, I don't know about you, but for me, I felt like I was still feeling the remnants of that game as we were the Chicago game, as we were calling the game against the Giants. Like, I felt still emotionally drained, and we didn't even play it. So I could only imagine the emotional drain and what it took for those players, and because it was an exhilarating play, one that, as you said, we had seen before, and don't know if we'll see it ever again. But so it was a testament for them to be able to go in there, not play their best to start with, and still able to come away with the victory. I think Coach Quinn, Dan, said he didn't feel like the team really was over that until like Saturday. So that lets you know they had already gone through a full week of practice, and then it was like, man, Saturday is finally when you feel like we recovered from that.
Listen, that was a crazy week. Like, you and I got real popular after that one too. I mean, it was just crazy. You know how many texts I got? I remember we were laughing. Like, by the time when we went from the booth to the locker room, I had 91 texts. And it didn't stop, once they started showing the clips, of everything, it didn't stop for us. So what do you think the players were going through like over the whole week? Like many people called me like for the next 3 days after that. It was nuts.
Yeah, your Q score went up, Bram, and people were trying to get me to do interviews. I declined, man. I'm talked out. I need to save my energy.
I'm not that popular that often. I got to take advantage of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, every once in a while. I had my 15 minutes on that one.
Yeah.
All right. So then we hit what ended up being the rough stretch of the season. This team needed a bye bad. They've needed it for a month. I'm glad it's here. And the schedule did them no favors. It just worked out that they got 2 heavyweight teams in a 4-day span, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. With Pittsburgh, man, I don't know how we'd be feeling about the playoffs had they, gotten a better spot on the Zach Ertz catch or didn't jump off sides late in the game, had gotten a chance to steal that thing. That was a great matchup between 2 really good teams. Give Russ credit for hitting, not unlike when we hit that one to Terry at Cincinnati. That was a big throw. That was a big boy throw that he hit late to Mike Williams that ended up being the difference in the game. This team fought through it, and it's just unfortunate we fell short against them.
No, it definitely was a big time throw by Russell Wilson. And, it was a game again where not really able to have the sort of balance you want, not being able to run the ball the way you would love to run the football. I thought it showed we showed a lot of toughness in that game going toe to toe with Pittsburgh. I'm still perplexed on that spot. How you can, it's obvious that the spot was short. You review it, and yet you still, hey, let's change it, move it up a half yard or whatever, let's remeasure. But for whatever reason or another, they opted not to do that. But, I think you mentioned, I think our offensive line, we were starting to deal with some injuries up at that point in the season. Offensive line was banged up and it's as you mentioned, the bye was still a little bit of ways away.
Yeah. They needed it, had to turn around, go up to Philadelphia. I just didn't have a good feeling about it. I mean, Philadelphia is streaking. This team needs a bye. The injuries are piling up. Jaden wasn't fully healthy yet. I'll give them credit. They hung in there and were right there. It's a 2-point game in the fourth quarter. They chose not to kick a field goal, and things just went crazy for 3 minutes where this happens every once in a while. It's like a snowball hit a mountain and an avalanche fell. And Philadelphia walks down the field, scores, gets an interception, scores again, gets out of hand. And, I'm very, very excited to see these 2 play again under different circumstances, under a different schedule, and hopefully with Washington being a lot healthier than they were when they played them the first time.
Now that coming off that tough game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going into Philly is going to be difficult regardless in a normal week where you have a full week to prepare for them. The way that team is built, the players that they have, how they're coached, that's going to be a difficult environment in a normal setting. But to have it on a short week, you're coming off to Pittsburgh and say, let's go tee it up again on a Thursday night and to be, going toe to toe with them. It was 12-10 with 8 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. Didn't get the 4th and 2 situation. Didn't get the 4th and 2, and the Eagles were able to kind of open things up in that fourth quarter after that. And the score was not indicative of how close the ball game was. And as you mentioned, we'll love to see what it's going to look like. Hopefully, we're at full strength, and I hope they be at full strength as well. And let's kind of see what it looks like on a normal week. If they're going to flex us, they would already flex us by now. Is that correct?
I don't think it's happening. I don't remember. I remember looking at the schedule. There's a prominent game that night, so I don't think it's getting moved. And I had heard Fox wants to protect it, so I don't. Yeah, so it's not going anywhere.
Maybe it goes to the 4 o'clock, even maybe not even the 4 o'clock window.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I don't know if that's Fox's national window. I'm not sure. So I think I had heard we're stuck at 1 o'clock with them. It's stuck's the wrong word for it, but you know how it is. All right, so then we get to Dallas. Had the mini bye. This is the only one of the year of the losses where I went, this is the one that got away from them. And not like we were talking about earlier about the Giants game where we're kind of down for anything. That was the weirdest finish I've ever seen in my life because that game was frustrating because this team had so many chances to put them away or at least get a lead in the first half. Dallas had a field goal blocked, missed a field goal, had a blocked punt and a fumble, and Washington was tied at half 3-3. That's on them. And then everything went haywire. But really, that's how I kind of remember it. They lost it in the first half, not the second half.
They definitely did take advantage of some great field position. You mentioned the block field goal, the block punt. I think a turnover forced fumble by, it was Bobby or Johnny Newton forced a fumble.
Yeah. Just
did not take advantage of the great field position that we had. And, at that point in time, the Cowboys, they were struggling. They were coming off a game where they lost against the Houston Texans, I believe. Anytime you have a bad team, a team that's not playing great, they're already coming to the game with doubt. And they're looking for a reason to kind of say, you know what, this is just not our day. Let's get out of here healthy, get back to Dallas, healthy. But we allowed them to stick and hang around, give up a big play right before the half instead of being up maybe 17-0, 20-0 at halftime. We got a situation where we're tied at 3-3 in that ball game, and we had nobody to blame for that loss but ourselves.
And, I thought that Giants game was weird. The end of this game was maybe the weirdest in the series history. 2 kick returns for touchdowns, 1 on an onside kick, 2 missed extra points, blocked punt, blocked field goal, 2 missed field goals, the play to Terry with 30 seconds left, 86-yard touchdown. The emotional up and down on those last 5 minutes, I've never experienced anything like that because they got back in the game. Turpin pulled a Madden move to score a touchdown on a kickoff return. We come back again anyway, get the ball back late, score a miracle touchdown, don't get to overtime. That was insane.
No, it was. If you think about the game, quite honestly, it wasn't a great offensive display up until the last 5 minutes of that ball game. It was kind of like, this game kind of boring. And then, what happened? You mentioned the Terry play, then the missed extra point, all the things that happened at the Turpin kick return, where that Madden move where you hit I think it's the X button where you do the spin, or X or the circle button. I think it was. I asked my son. I think he told me it was the X button.
I'm not guessing again. You made fun of me last time.
I think my son told me it was the X button. Yeah. But he not only did the spin move, he spent and he went 0 to 60 in one step.
Yeah, that's
the part of it too. Okay, it's one thing to do the spin move, but to go from 0 to 60 in one step. I mean, he's a tremendous playmaker, and the emotions of that game, the way it ended. I mean, it was like, wow, what did we just witness?
So to your point about when a team is losing, you wonder what their psyche is coming in. I'll be honest with you. I was paranoid coming into this Tennessee game because if this team's serious about making a playoff run, they had to win that game. They had to win.
Right.
It's a 3-8 AFC team, who's struggling. Quarterback turns the ball over a lot, but they have the number 2 defense in the league. They had just come off a win against Houston. I was surprised by the Dallas outcome. I just didn't see that coming. I thought it was a get-right game for Washington. And it's just so reassuring that, out of the blue, they looked like that team that played Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Carolina.
Yeah, and this was a situation where we took advantage of the great field position in that ball game, especially early. You get the short field to start the ball game. I think we took over at around our 40-yard line. B-Rob, first carry goes 40 yards. We had a fumble recovery by Mikey Sainristil. Some other plays that went our way where instead of the difference between the game against the Cowboys and the game against the Titans, we actually capitalized on that great field position. And in the first quarter, we were up 21-0 or 28 zip. Yeah, so two similar type of flows to the games in terms of great field position, but the difference was we took advantage of that great field position.
I mean, it was crazy. I like the whole time I'm like walking in going, I think they're going to win, but I'm not really sure. I hope they I don't care what the score is. I just hope they win, get to the bye week 8-5, feeling good, put the losing streak behind them. No style points necessary. But Jayden looks like Jayden from early in the season. The run game was completely unstoppable. Chris Rodriguez is emblematic of all the things we were talking about earlier, the buy-in on the team. The guy's been up and down from the practice squad to the roster, had to be released. Then Austin Eckler gets hurt. They call him back. He wears his head, shows up, nearly runs for 100 yards. That team was giving up 100 yards a game. This team almost had 200-yard rushers against them. It was really telling.
Yeah, no, Jayden, you mentioned Jayden looking like he looked. That was as good as we had probably saw him play, and especially from a running aspect, and maybe over a month since prior to the rib injury. Yeah, he was making people miss. The one touchdown run he had inside the red zone where he was dodging tight defenders like a pedestrian trying to cross the street in 5 o'clock rush hour traffic. I mean, he was making people miss, zigging and zagging. But when I looked at Tennessee's defense, that defensive front, they had some guys who can cause trouble for you. They had some edge rushers. They're pretty solid in what they did schematically from a coverage standpoint. I thought we have a tougher time running the ball against them than we did. And we ran for over 260 yards. So I was definitely surprised by that.
Yeah, it was wild. All right. We got 4 games to go. Playoffs are very much in sight. Division's going to be tough because they need Philadelphia to stop winning so much. And 4 of their last 5 are at home. So it's going to be very tough to catch them. I still am very interested in this rematch because I think it's going to be a very different game. But New Orleans is first, under 500, team that changed their coach in the middle of the season. What's kind of your early expectations for the game against the Saints?
I just started watching, one of the Saints games against the Browns, man, where they ran for over 200 yards in that game against the Browns. And now a lot of that running success they had came from Taysom Hill, being a Wildcat quarterback. Yeah. He's out for the season now. So I will say this, Kamara, he's an outstanding football player, and they got some playmakers on offense, and it's not gonna be an easy game. So for us and our fan base, don't get to thinking, hey, the Saints, they're 4-8 right now at this current juncture. They're not a good football team. They are going to play extremely tough. If you allow that dome to get rocking, it will be extremely difficult. Extremely difficult environment to deal with because those fans come out and support their team. So, we have to come in there and play our A game. We're going to come out of there with a victory. And I know Dan Quinn, he knows what it's like to play in New Orleans. He was the head coach of the Falcons for a number of years. So he'll have those guys ready for that environment and understanding, hey, this is what we're up against. They got, Cam Jordan, he's still a good productive player for them. Tyrann Mathieu, still good football player for them. We know Chase Young will want to have a good game against his former team that traded him. So, we'll have to be ready to rock and roll against the Saints in New Orleans.
So obviously, the playoffs are very much in reach. What do you think the team needs to do the last 4 games to ensure they get there?
I think we need to win at least 2 more. I think if we get to 10, I feel like 10 is will be enough. Obviously, I would love for us to go 4-0, but I'm just saying, I think if we get to 10, that'll be enough given the state of the NFC West. The NFC Central or North, whatever they're called now, NFC North. I think they're going to get 3 teams in, and the South and the West will only get 1 each. Whoever the division winners are of those teams.
I'll tell you though,
I think we need to get to 10.
One that worries me is the South. Go look at the schedules that Atlanta and Tampa Bay have. It's littered with under 500 teams. So. Well, and they've already played each other twice. So that's the worry I have about those teams.
Here's the thing. One of those 10 beat the Falcons. One of those victories needs to be against the Falcons.
I agree.
Because and let's have hopefully the Buccaneers. If the Buccaneers win a division, great. But we don't need the Bucs to get to 10 wins. We need the Bucs to win their division because we would lose head to head with those guys. I don't know what the Bucs' current record is. Are they 5-6? I think they're 6-6 right now, huh?
I don't know. You got the computer in front of you. You look.
Hey, let me. You got 1-2 right there. Let me. Hold on. I'll tell you right now. The Bucs are. I believe it was 6-6 last time I checked.
Yeah, I think so because they barely beat Carolina in overtime last week.
Yeah, the Bucs and Atlanta both are 6-6. Yeah, they're both 6-6. Yeah. So
you want to get concerned though, go look at their schedules. So that Atlanta game is going to be huge. It's going to be absolutely huge.
Again,
for Washington.
Ideally, we would want the Falcons. I believe we would want the Buccaneers to win that division, and us have the tiebreaker over the Falcons.
Yeah,
that would be the best case scenario. We wouldn't want the Falcons to win that division, and us in a tiebreaker scenario with the Buccaneers because they beat us in the head to head.
All right, last thing. So we got a month. Pro Bowl nominations are going to come out in a few weeks. All the other awards are going to come at the end of the year, but I think there's a number of people here who are up for prominent awards on the Pro Bowl real quick, because I think there's a lot of good names on this team that are up for it. Here are the ones I came up with. Jaden. I think Jaden should be a Pro Bowl quarterback this year. I know he's a rookie. I think he should be. Terry's top 5 receiver as entering play this week. Obviously they've played one more game than everybody else, so we'll see where his numbers are. But I think he belongs there. Luvu's been outrageous this year, and I think ought to make the Pro Bowl.
Right.
Dante Fowler, I'm hoping is going to end up double-digit sacks. Luvu too. I think he's got a shot to do it. And then on the offensive line, Biadasz and Cosme, I think are both really, really good candidates for the Pro Bowl too.
No, you make a great point with those guys. I really would love for the offensive line, because when you played as well as our offense has played, look at us being a top three rushing offense, and Jaden and the offense scoring as many points. That offensive line is very underrated, and Biadasz has been the glue for that offensive line. You look at the battles that he had with Dexter Lawrence, and just when he's on top of his game and health is good for him, that offense rolls. He got banged up a little bit, but Biadasz definitely deserves. Sam Cosme, he's been a linchpin, tremendous leader on this offensive line. He kind of brings the toughness and physicality of that offensive line, and he's definitely very deserving of making the Pro Bowl. Jaden, obviously. Terry, he's second in the NFC right now in receiving yards behind Justin Jefferson. So they'll take 4 wide receivers from the NFC. So I believe Jaden and Terry will definitely be there. You mentioned the guys on the defensive side. Louisville's been outstanding. He's anybody who's seen us play, they're like, man, Frankie Louisville deserves to be there. Bobby Wagner's going to be. He's been in 10 Pro Bowls. So I think he has a great chance he'll make it. He's still playing at a high level. And you mentioned Fowler. He would be he's very deserving as well.
And for the last month, I think Jaden's a clear front runner for Rookie of the Year and deserves it. There's only 2 other players that I think really are in the discussion at this point. Bo Nix, who's had a very good season, and Denver has similarly, I don't think had a lot of expectations, but are playing above, I think what people thought. He's really come on. And then Brock Bowers, who I don't know why he isn't getting a lot of attention, but he's posting unreal numbers for a rookie tight end, like greatest rookie tight end numbers ever. He's among the league leaders in receptions and yards and all that stuff. So I think it's their record. He's not getting a lot of shine for it.
Right.
But I think Jaden's going to end up the Rookie of the Year if this team ends the way they kind of started.
Well, it's funny because coming into the draft, I text there's a command center group text, and I text the guys. I was like, man, I love Jaden, and my second favorite quarterback was Bo Nix. And I don't know if people, really took me serious at that point in time, but when I watched him, how he played at Auburn and how he played at Oregon. At Oregon, he completed almost 70% of his passes, maybe even more than that. And he had, some ridiculous amount of starts. Tremendous athlete. He was the number one dual threat quarterback coming out of high school. And people didn't really understand. If you didn't watch a lot of Oregon games, you probably didn't realize his mobility. I thought he would have been tremendous in that Kyle Shanahan, that type of offense. Obviously, ended up going to Sean Payton and the Broncos, and he's one of the great quarterback guys. But rookie of the year is Jaden DeLuz. He's the front runner. I don't think it's really that close. Brock Bowers, they're 2-10. That's why you're not hearing about him. And the quarterback's going to garner more attention. And until you just mentioned Brock, and I think I've heard a couple other people mention him recently. I didn't know he was so high in receiving yards. Yeah, because again, he's playing for the Raiders and they're 2-10.
Yeah, he's having an outrageous year. But for Jaden, hey, gets to go back to Louisiana this week. Hopefully put on a showcase against the Saints. Get this team hopefully to 9-5, which is where we're going to leave it here for the Booth Review. We'll talk to you after the Saints game.